With both Israeli and Palestinian faith in a two-state solution lower than ever before, all eyes are on the future. But that future is especially murky given the fact that current Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is in questionable health. Abbas is turning 83 in November. He's had a long history of heart problems, fought colon cancer, and he's been hospitalized more than a few times this year alone. But with no clear successor in sight, the question remains what will become of peace if and when Abbas is no longer president. With me now to discuss this is Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Sherman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As always. So there's two scenarios here, as I understand it, right? There's one side where if and when Abbas leaves, the current Fatah leaders will kind of divide power amongst themselves, and then the other possibility is tantamount to gang warfare, where it's going to be a vacuum. People are going to fight over what remains. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, of course, there's a third option that the Islamic groups might take over, and you may have a rerun of what you had in Gaza, only on a much larger scale. And instead of having a 50-kilometer border with this Islamic entity, you'll have a 500-kilometer border. And instead of it abutting sparsely populated rural area, it will abut a heavily populated urban area. Mm-hmm. And I think this sort of, Abbas's passing is not an unexpected event. And I think it underscores the appalling myopia of the two-state principle. Because, this has been going on for a quarter of a century. And we've seen that the Palestinians are not really interested in a two-state solution, but in a two-stage solution, where they take the territory that they're offered and turn it into a platform for attacking Israel. And it's happened everywhere, whether it's in Gaza, or in South Lebanon, or in Judea and Samaria. And even, we're seeing an emerging threat in Sinai at the moment, Sinai at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's much room for optimism.
Sure, but I will say that whoever does become the leader, whatever that leadership looks like, that in the Palestinian Authority, whatever that looks like after Abbas is gone, that impacts Israel. So does Israel stand a better chance for peace, however you define it, if it's a war zone, if it's like Gaza, or if there's some kind of systemized leadership? What would Israel want to see happen there?
Well, obviously, if there's chaos, there's no one to talk to, and you have a mini Syria there. So if you believe for some reason that you can reach some kind of modus vivendi with the Palestinians, then obviously some sort of authoritative leader is preferable. I don't see anyone of outstanding stature emerging, unless, of course, it's someone like Marwan Barghouti, who's been in prison.
Who's quite more extreme.
Who's been in prison for multiple murders of Israelis, which more or less shows who's popular with the Palestinians.
Right. Well, that also comes from dissatisfaction with decades of Abbas's rule, because Abbas has done very little for the average Palestinian, many would say, and that's why peace, even just belief that there could be peace, or what that peace looks like, is lower than ever.
Well, I think in many ways what you see in the West Bank or Judea and Samaria reflects the collective characteristics of the Palestinians. There were parties of Salim Fayyad who were focusing on improving socioeconomic conditions, and they got about, I think, 3% of the vote 11 years ago when the Palestinians managed to put together an election. And you can see all the Palestinians have done, despite massive international aid, is they've produced a dysfunctional polity and a minute economy, bloated public sector, completely dependent on international aid. Why does anyone think this is going anywhere if this has been the case for the last quarter century?
Well, either way, Abbas is very old, his health is very unstable. I think everyone, and the word is that leaders in Fatah are allying themselves with armed gangs, more or less, in the West Bank, in chance that it goes that direction.
Well, I think the clash between intra-Fatah armed gangs is certainly possible, but I think there's also the possibility of Fatah having to contend with armed gangs of Hamas and other Islamic
Hamas
groups.
seeping in the West Bank.
Sure,
very possible.
There's no reason to think that you're not going to see a rerun of Gaza, especially if the IDF is going to reduce its presence, if Trump's plan comes through and that involves pulling back Israeli troops. I think the only thing that hasn't allowed a rerun of Gaza is the IDF presence there.
Sure. Well, many question marks remain. Dr. Sherman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.